everyone. My name is Hunter, and this week we're going to continue our study in the Psalms, and this week's Psalm is going to be Psalm 3. So if you can follow along with me, I'm going to read Psalm 3 really quick and then just share a few thoughts with you. So Psalm 3 says, "A Psalm of David when he fled from Absalom his son. O Lord, how many are my foes? Many are rising against me. Many are saying of my soul, there is no salvation for him in God. But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory and the lifter of my head. I cried aloud to the Lord, and he answered me from his holy hill. Selah. I lay down and slept, I woke again, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of many thousands of people who have set themselves against me all around. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God. For you strike all my enemies on the cheek, you break the teeth of the wicked. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing be on your people." So in this psalm, we see lots of emotions coming from David. We see David afraid, in great distress because of his circumstances. Now, this is an interesting psalm because in many ways, this is the first psalm that we have of David and reflecting on circumstances in David's life. Previous to this, in Psalm 1 and 2, we had an introduction to the Psalms. And what we see here is this ideal vision of God bringing his reign to earth through the king, through his anointed king, and who is called his son. And we see in Psalm 2 that there are many who oppose God's anointed king. There are many who do not want him to be king. But God is going to fulfill his purposes no matter what the opposition is. God will put his king to reign. Now, what we see in Psalm 3 is something that is quite surprising. We see that the ones who are rebelling against the king, the people who are raging against the Lord and his anointed one, they're not the Gentiles, they're not the outsiders. They're actually people you would not expect. And here in Psalm 3, we see that it's actually David's own son. We see this in the very beginning. A psalm of David when he fled from Absalom his son. How painful this might have been for David, that his own son was trying to kill him. His own son was opposing him, was taking over his throne. And if you think of David in his position as king having to run away because his son was trying to kill him. And not only did David have to leave his position, but he also lost all his support, all his close friends, all of the counselors and armies. They were all following his son and not David. And David also, here, it's very obvious that he has family pain, that his family is divided. And pretty much everything that David could put his identity in, all the things he could look to and feel good about himself, position, family, status, acceptance from others, we see that it is all taken away from him. And this vision of Psalm 2 of the king reigning and the kingdom being established, we see that it is not a reality. Psalm 2 gives us the vision of the kingdom, but we see that it is not yet there, that David is not reigning. He's on the run. He's afraid for his life. And what we see in verses 1 and 2 is that many are rising against him. He says this several times, that many are his foes. Many are saying of his soul, there's no salvation for him in God. And maybe you have felt like this at times. Maybe you have thought of your circumstances. Maybe you have family issues. Maybe you have circumstances that are just not going your way, and you're disappointed in the hand that God has dealt you. And you're wondering, what is for me? Everything seems to be against me, and there is no hope for me. And these are the circumstances that David finds himself. And so he rehearses that there are many against him. There are enemies surrounding him. What a terrifying place this would be. But we see something very encouraging in verse 3. And this is a very important word in the Bible. It's the word but. After rehearsing his circumstances, David says, "But you, O Lord, are a shield about me." Even though everything is against him, he has the Lord, and the Lord is his shield. The Lord is his glory. The Lord is the one who lifts his head. And what we see happen here is that David begins to find his identity, not in his family, not in his position, not in his acceptance from others, but he finds his identity in the Lord. And he puts his trust in the Lord. And this encourages his soul. This is how he fights fear and anxiety, as he looks to the Lord in the midst of his circumstances. And he realizes that it doesn't really matter what is against him. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are. The Lord is his shield. If the Lord is for him, everyone else could be against him, and it does not matter. The Lord will fulfill his purposes in his life. And as we see in Psalm 2, David knew that God had determined to make his anointed one reign as king. And he knew that even if all the circumstances were against him, God was going to do what he said he would do. And so we see this gives rest to David. In verse 5, he says, I lay down and slept. I awoke again, for the Lord sustained me. In the midst of these circumstances, David could sleep. I don't know about you, but if I had enemies chasing me, if my son had betrayed me and was trying to kill me, I think I would have trouble sleeping, especially when I knew that they were pursuing me at all times. But in the midst of his difficult circumstances, he could sleep and rest because he knew that ultimately the Lord was in control. The Lord was for him. The Lord was kind and good, and that he was ultimately the one who would protect him. And so in light of this, David cries out in prayer to God, and he pleads with God to deliver him from his enemies. And he can pray this because he knows God's will. He's just praying, asking God to do what God has already said that he would do. And so he says in verse 7, Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God, for you strike all my enemies on the cheek. You break the teeth of the wicked. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing be on your people. And he knows that the salvation that will come to the people is ultimately going to come through him. He knows that God has provided a king that will reign on the throne forever, who is going to come through him. It's going to be his offspring, which is ultimately going to be the Lord Jesus. And he knew that the Son of God, the Messiah, the anointed one who would reign forever, was coming through him. So he could confidently plea for God to deliver him because he knew that he had to survive. And so he asked God to crush his enemies, to destroy his enemies. And an amazing thing is that God did this. We see, if we read the circumstances in Samuel, we see that God delivered him. God completely reversed the circumstances, delivered David. Jesus comes through him, and we see something amazing happen with Jesus. That with Jesus, we do not see Jesus pleading with God to break the teeth of the wicked, to strike his enemies. But we see Jesus actually being struck by God. We see Jesus taking the punishment of his enemy. And this is how Jesus provides salvation for all the peoples. That all who put their hope in Jesus, he saves them. And this is our hope. Our only hope is Jesus. And we have this same God who delivered David, who gave him peace in the midst of his turmoil and his difficult circumstances. And so my encouragement to you would be to look to the Lord, to realize that God is greater than any of your circumstances, and to not look at your circumstances, but to look to the Lord, to look to him for help. And he has proven over and over again that he will deliver you in your time of